It's about 5 minutes have passed. I feel like that's a good amount of time to give people. I'm going to be covering a lot of content today, so I'd like to get started as soon as possible. Additionally, I think I would recommend taking notes, specifically because of a lot of the context I'll be going over is, I think, pretty specific. After this, you'll be sent a recording, but just having notes during the meeting to kind of jog your memory about what's happening, I think will be helpful. But again, you'll be sent a recording, so you can refresh your memory of whatever we go over today. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If anyone has any questions, I can see the chat, but it's not going to be very immediate. I'll probably see it, check it after every slide, but I'm going to have time towards the end for questions. I saw someone said I can't hear him. Is that everyone? If you guys can, someone, okay, awesome. All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I would, whoever said that, I would recommend leaving the session and rejoining, checking maybe if your speaker is selected. But yeah, no worries. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the purpose of today's session is really because of an issue I noticed while teaching and just kind of in the LSAT space. I think there's a lot of confusion about how you study for this test. There's a bunch of resources that'll give you a structure, a curriculum, and that's very helpful for most people. But a lot of people I've noticed have been struggling with figuring out an approach that works for them and having confidence in that approach. So that's kind of why I made this seminar. It's the reason for why I think this will be helpful for pretty much every student I've ever worked with. This question has come up in some way. So yeah, I think that all the substance in this, if you're trying to have more confidence in your approach to studying for the LSAT, this should be helpful. That said, this is what we'll be covering. So the sections of the LSAT will be kind of brief. I assume most people in here will have an idea of the sections that are in the LSAT, the kinds of questions that are being asked. But then we're going to move into what I think is the meat of this seminar, which is the skills that are actually being tested by the LSAT, and then how you improve on those skills. These things are, it took me a long time to figure out, because the way the LSAT is presented to you, it's not obvious. But I realized that you don't have to take the test the way it's presented to you. You should take the test the way that makes the most sense for you. So that's kind of the, I think, overall guiding approach to how I formulated this studying process. Cool. So I'll just go a little bit over my background. I don't think that I got to the law school route, I think the way that most people normally do. The way that these lists, these experiences are structured is in most recent to oldest. So I was a field organizer for this guy running for Congress in Arizona. It was I'm pretty sure you guys are probably aware, pretty competitive and heated election cycle. While I was there, I think we were in the top 10 most expensive congressional cycles. I got to talk to and meet a lot of cool people. And I realized that the way that I can kind of improve my approach to making things better in a very specific way was going to be taking the law school route. But I definitely didn't have that feeling before. Before that experience, I spent some time working at this company called PIN, Power in Numbers. It's a startup, venture-backed, that was based in New York. And my kind of reason for all of this was I thought that the law school route, all of these things, none of these things were making sense to me, but I found startups to be pretty cool. I found the motivations and the drive and honestly the passion of the people who are running these businesses very inspiring myself. And because I wasn't confident what I wanted to do, I came to this company, worked there for a little bit in a sales role. Our product was a little bit complex, but if you guys are familiar with venture capital at all, the product that we were trying to offer to people was to make venture capital more accessible. So the idea is that if you have a business that you think is a great idea, it's in the startup phase, and you want to invest in it, there's a lot of arbitrary and honestly archaic regulation that prevents most people from investing in those startups. So we were trying to get people who we believed were sophisticated investors to invest in the things they cared about. So some of our clients were like students at the Wharton Business School at UPenn. Essentially, we were kind of creating a legal structure for them to invest in their fellow classmates' startups. It was really, really cool. I met a lot of smart people, and it kind of convinced me that I want to approach I want to take my approach to the law because I saw how many people it impacted. No one could escape regulation, and I wanted to be responsible for driving that in a way that I think was best for the people that it affected. And before all of that, I was director of education at this company called Rem & Co. We were doing small business consulting for small businesses around the University of Florida, where I went to school. It was a really great experience. It was I think the change point for me in terms of I want to explore business maybe a little bit more. But no, I realized that the law is where everyone has to deal with it. I want to have the highest impact. I want to talk to the most amount of people, and that felt like best represented by going to law school. Over in the corner, there's a code. If you guys want to write it down, I mean, honestly, it's going to happen at the end, so feel free to ignore it. But it's going to give you 20% off your first session with me. But yeah, it's going to pop up again at the end, so no need to write it down or anything. And next slide. Awesome. So yeah, now let's start getting into the meat of this, the sections of the LSAT. Generally, I'm just going to give a broad overview because I feel like you can find a lot of this information about just basic facts about the test available online. Logical reasoning is going to be a section that typically comprises at least 2 on your LSAT. A lot of people have 3 sometimes. We noticed that, or at least I've noticed that the LSAT is skewed for there's going to be 4 sections, 2 of which are going to be LR, logical reasoning, 1 of which is going to be reading comprehension, and then an experimental one. A lot of the students that I've spoken with mostly have that logical reasoning being their 3rd section. So a lot of people tend to focus on that when they're studying. Logical reasoning typically looks like some kind of stimulus, some kind of written material that is describing a situation, a phenomenon, and presenting someone's argument about that phenomenon. It's not the way that we typically absorb and are presented information. So for a lot of people, when they come to the LSAT, it does feel a bit foreign. It does feel a bit convoluted, unnecessarily complicated. But that's what we have to realize is that's the skill that we want to improve on. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but you're going to constantly hear you're going to constantly hear this theme about the LSAT, which is they're trying to see what can you tell me, the LSAT, about the facts that they present to you. That's generally what's happening in both logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You're given a series of facts and you're asked a bunch of questions about what's going on here. For logical reasoning, there's about 15 question types: strengthening, weakening. Can you strengthen the author's argument? Can you weaken the author's argument? What's a necessary assumption for the author's argument? What's a sufficient assumption for the author's argument? If these words feel a little bit weird for you, if you haven't heard of them before, feel free to just Google some question types of LR. There's a ton of free material on this, but I want to get into some things that you won't hear from the resources you'll find online. The section is broken down into 35 minutes. You have about 24 to 26 questions. Same thing for reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is you are presented, instead of a stimulus as your set of facts, you're presented a passage. So it can be law, it can be humanities, science, or social science. And again, your goal is to tell the LSAT what is happening. What can I prove from the information that you've just given me? Also, you're going to get a passage. I think this happens in pretty much everyone's, is a comparative reading passage, which requires you guys to compare and contrast and understand what is the relationship between 2 different passages. What do they have in common? What are they disagreeing on, or what are they agreeing on? And again, you're being asked, what is happening in this passage? What is happening in this passage? And what can you tell me about what they have in common or what they don't have in common? So right now, I'm going to spend probably a minute or 2 giving an overview of how each section is specifically evaluated. Real quick, before I get into that, I'm going to check the chat to see if anyone said anything. Awesome. Nothing. We're in the clear. Cool. So yeah, I think it's important for you guys to understand how are both of these sections being evaluated? What am I being tested on? Because the words of logical reasoning, stimulus, material, facts, these are pretty abstract ideas. They're pretty broad. And so I believe it's important for you to understand what skill set is actually being expected of you so that you can have a focused, efficient approach that you believe in. because you're recognizing that I'm improving on the skills that are going to be tested on the LSAT. So what are those skills? First, you're being asked, do you understand what you're reading? And I know most people read that and they're like, duh, I know what I'm reading. But when we realize, and I'm sure if any of you guys have studied for the LSAT, understanding is unbelievably broad. It's an incredibly abstract idea. And when I was studying for this test, I realized a lot of the things that I thought I knew inside and out, that I understood completely, I didn't. And it was a rude awakening, I would say. This feeling of like, do I know anything? But when you realize what understanding actually looks like on the LSAT, it makes things a lot more easier to figure out how to improve on it. So the definition of understanding on the LSAT is going to be, can you identify the logically defensible conclusions using only the material presented? But what is logically defensible? It's, can you prove to me what must or must not be true? What could or could not be true? And on top of that, can you tell me what's the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this word in the context it's being used? What is the meaning of this word when I change the context? Does the author understand that the meaning is being changed from context to context? These are things that we typically don't think about in our daily lives, but it becomes extremely apparent that this is the main thing that the LSAT's looking for. Do you understand what I'm presenting to you, and can you prove it? The next skill is going to be, can you be skeptical? And this is, again, something that I personally found extremely not natural, not intuitive in the slightest. I think that most of you guys will realize, like, in our daily lives, we take what the other person is saying to us as truth at face value. You're never going to question your friend who's telling you, like, oh yeah, I missed the bus because I came to the stop 5 minutes late. And then you're going to ask them, have you considered this flaw to your approach? No real person or human does that. But we have to on the LSAT. We're constantly being tested if you can question or find reasons why the conclusion might not be valid. And valid is, again, another abstract concept. But on the LSAT, what it looks like is valid means, is the conclusion true in every reasonable context? If it is, that conclusion is valid. That argument might be considered valid. But this is what understanding looks like in a critical sense. Being skeptical is, I understand what you're saying, but you haven't considered this, which might prove you wrong. And again, this is really something that I've noticed, especially for me. Most people don't do this in their normal daily lives. And so when we come to the LSAT, it does feel a bit foreign and a bit weird, but it's a skill like any other that you can improve on. The goal of your studying is to refine all of these skills, but skepticism in particular, it looks like a lot of people, you might see this word thrown around, critical intuition, where your mind starts automatically finding reasons to critique an argument, where immediately your mind goes to reasons why that might not be 100% true. And I think that's the goal if you're truly trying to, I assume everyone here is trying to improve, is trying to get your mind faster and faster at identifying reasons why that conclusion might not be true every single time. Third, I'm gonna try to get through this quickly. Can you understand what you're reading quickly? I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. If any of you guys have ever tested before, it's the timing of the LSAT is a beast of its own. You have about 24 to 26 questions in 35 minutes, which breaks down to about 1:20 seconds per question, which might as well be a second when you're taking the test. On top of that, if you guys practice, or as you'll notice when you take an LR section, typically questions at the start are easier than the questions at the end. And so most people will want to spend more time on the harder questions. So you're not looking to spend 1:20 seconds per question. In fact, you're trying to get extremely efficient at this test. You're trying to make sure that of those 35 minutes, you're allocating exactly how much time you need for the questions that you need them for, and you're not wasting a single second more. That is truly how you get comfortable with timing, is you understand this is where I need to spend some time on, and this is where I need to make a decision and move on. I don't need to doubt myself. I don't need to question myself. I need to understand, believe what I'm selecting as correct or wrong, and then move on. And then last, Can you understand quickly, skeptically, and for a long time? Essentially, the LSAT is supposed to be like 2.5 hours, but when I took it, I think it took me, by the time I got into my home, it was 4.5 hours. It's brutal. It's a mental marathon, and it's something that people in this space woefully under-address in their prep. You have to realize no one would do a marathon without training. You have to put yourself through a little bit of endurance first before you go and try to take it to your max. That's what the LSAT looks like. When we are preparing for a marathon where we're going to have to actively think and dedicate ourselves for a certain amount of time, we want to make sure that we're prepared for it. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this, and I'm going to get into that towards the end. But before I do, I just really want to quickly ask, so I kind of get an idea of what you guys are looking for most in this seminar, which is, if you guys can put in the chat really quick, just how far are you into your LSAT prep? If you guys are starting out, I haven't started, I haven't opened a book, I haven't tried a question, been studying for a while, not sure why my scores aren't improving, tested for a few times and not getting the score I like, anything like that. Awesome. Oh, there's a lot. I'm seeing a lot of starting out. Not much. Haven't started. Still trying to master fundamentals. Starting brand new. Okay, that's awesome because, okay, perfect. I'm really happy that the majority of you guys are just starting out, because I think I can save you guys a lot of wasted time. Because I think when I started studying, I think someone's unmuted. 1 second. Cool. All right, that should be good. Yeah, when I studied, I think I wasted probably like 2-3 months at the start, just not sure what I was doing, trying different things, not realizing that this wasn't working, and not sure what to do next. So yeah, if you're just starting out, this is perfect. You're gonna get a very comprehensive approach to what should your review actually look like. Next slide. Actually, yeah, perfect. Next slide. How do I get started? There's 2 ways that I recommend to everyone. There is no like dipping your toe into the LSAT. It's, you are studying for the LSAT, and that is a endeavor that you're taking on. This is a hard test, guys. This is a test that people study for a long time, dedicate significant amount of time and effort towards, and can still find themselves not sure and not confident in what their score is, not happy with what their score is. So when I say like both of these approaches require serious effort, that is unavoidable in studying for this test. So the 2 ways I would say is, I'll go down the first one on the left. So you take a diagnostic. My guidance for this is, do not take it timed. There's no reason to take it timed. A lot of people, when they take a cold diagnostic, which is, I don't know anything about the LSAT, and I'm going to try to take an LSAT under timed conditions, they'll get a score they're not happy with and then be convinced that this is not for me. Imagine if I put like a high school track star into the Olympics and then he didn't do well, and then he was convinced that running is not for him. That is what you're doing to yourself if you're taking a cold diagnostic. You're not getting an accurate reflection of what is your aptitude for this test. What's your capability to improve? Because that's what we care about. No one's going to care about what's your first score. They're going to care about what's your last score. What are you submitting to me? That is what we want to do. That's what we want to get the highest we possibly can. So this first score is truly, I want you to think of it as almost meaningless. Don't take it to heart in any way. All it's going to tell you is, this is how I get started. This is where I should dedicate my time towards first. So after you take that diagnostic, remember untimed, you should complete some kind of foundational course, some kind of book, anything like there's a bunch. Princeton Review, Mike Kim has an LSAT trainer, the Logical Reasoning Poll by Ellen Cassidy, Power Score Bibles. None of these, you can't go wrong with any of these. Truly, I've gone through every single resource I just listed and more. These all teach relatively the same concepts, but they present them in different manners. For some people, they prefer the drilling apparatus on 7-stage. They really like the way that they can custom make anything. And some students really appreciate like, no, I want this many questions of this many type. Other people really like the user interface of LSAT labs. It just feels more comforting. It feels less intense. And I would say whichever one you like more, do that. The most important thing is just getting started. That is the part where most people really feel a lot of pressure is I don't know how to get started, and they feel themselves caught in this paralysis analysis of researching the best ways to get started. And this is it. You just get started. So after you do that foundational course, move on to drilling and reviewing. Drilling looks like creating a set of X amount of LR questions, X amount of RC passages, and then working through them. You're trying, because that's what we're going to do on the LSAT. We're going to take these questions and we're going to try to get as many of them right as possible. The reason why I'm emphasizing this so much is because a lot of resources will try to spend a lot of time on like formal logic and how to understand conditionals. And of course, this language is extremely helpful for a lot of people. This appears on the LSAT, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people, if it's not intuitive for them, it can feel intimidating. It can feel like, oh, is this the way that everyone's getting it and I'm just not? And I can tell you right now, no, those are designed to try to make sense to most people, but you do not have to understand formal logic to do well on the LSAT. All you have to do is get LR questions right and get RC questions right. That's it. After you finish drilling, we're going to go into reviewing as well a little bit later, but full length practice tests. This is, again, something that you work your way towards. It's not, you're not jumping in and you're going to take a full LSAT right after you did a drill of maybe 10, 15 questions, because you're going to get to the end, you're going to be done. You're going to be mentally fried and you're going to get a bad score and you're going to think that means I don't know anything. You work your way up, maybe a section, maybe then 2 sections, 3 sections without any breaks, 4 sections and make one of them an experimental. But this happens gradually. No one does this immediately. It's extremely demanding, and I don't recommend it to a single one of my students. The other way is basically the same thing, except a bit flip-flopped. This is what I recommend to people who feel just kind of intimidated by getting started. Do the course first, because then you get some kind of foundational knowledge, some kind of background, something to kind of work with when you go into these LR questions or RC passages. But both of these are 100% fine. Both of these will yield the same amount of results if you put in the same amount of effort. It's just about what you're comfortable with. Are you okay with jumping in and taking a cannonball, or do you want to dip your toe in and kind of acclimate to the water and then start swimming? So I'm going to move on to how we improve. Real quick, I'm going to check the chat to see if there's anything going on. Okay, I see a few messages. Can you recommend? Can you put those resources? Yes, yes, doable. RC is challenging. How much time? Okay, cool. I'm gonna, yeah, well, I'll answer the questions about what resources I recommend at the end. Real quick, Wyatt, how much time does this method take starting from scratch? This is effort. Okay. I don't think there's any dancing around that. This, what I'm describing is time not to understand, and how I have to change my. Hey everyone. Yeah, sorry. I think I have to. Okay, my camera, I'm not sure why it's not working. I think it just died. It was an external cam, so maybe that might be why. But yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. Yeah, sorry about. Are you guys? Am I back? Cool, cool. Sorry about that. Um, awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just touched on, yeah, the LSAT. Both ways, both these approaches will work. Um, Truly, it's about like, yeah, do I want to just take a cannonball and jump in and try to figure it out on the way? Second, do I want to dip my toe in? Um, and okay, so when I was answering the chat, okay, so the first question I saw was actually no. I think it'd probably be best if we save this to the end. I want to get through all the substance first. But yeah, we'll have time for questions at the end for sure. Um, if someone is unmuted, I think someone might be unmuted. Cool. I think that is better now. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. How do we improve? Oh, get the slide. Okay. How do we improve? It's not a simple but relatively straightforward math equation. It looks like diligence, consistent, regular effort, where you're each day, little by little, each week, month, you're seeing effort. You're forcing yourself to put effort in, even when it's hard, even when it's you don't want to do it. Those are the days where you have to just bang out a few questions. Maybe read a passage or two, review some questions that you weren't sure about the other day. But as long as you're consistent, you will see far more outcome, far more improvements in your outcomes than if you try to go really hard for a few weeks and then burn out and then take a break for a few weeks and then come back and you're confused about what am I supposed to do and what do I remember? Do I remember this? Do I cover this? I would recommend, even if you don't have to, I would not recommend 4 to 6 hours a day, which I see a lot of people do. I would recommend find something that you can do consistently and regularly and stick to it. Second is practice, kind of falls in the first one. You have to practice. You have to do these questions. If you don't do these questions, you will never understand how to get them right. It looks like sitting with LR questions. It looks like sitting with RC passages for as long as you need and admitting to yourself humility. I don't understand this. And I can tell this to you guys like from like the bottom of my heart, that was the hardest part for me. I think a lot of people when they come to this test, they're probably people who reading was like their favorite, like growing up. Like English was their favorite subject in school. Reading comprehension was you preferred that over math on the standardized testing that you took, and so you come to this test feeling pretty confident in yourself, and then you get some really bad section results, and then you start doubting. I don't think I understand anything, and that is where we need to start. Figure out what I don't understand. Figure out what I'm not sure about, because that's the only way that I'll be able to improve on them. If I don't tell myself I don't know this, that I will continually make that mistake happen again and again. And this is by far of those three that I just listed, diligence, practice, and humility, this is the one that most people struggle with. They don't know how to admit to themselves, I don't understand this, so that they can figure it out. This is going to look like a 3-step process. First, you drill, you practice. You sit there and you do these questions and you do them over and over until you're confident that I understand what I'm doing. I understand that my approach is working. I understand that my studying process is yielding the results I want. Because if you don't drill, you'll never see the results of your efforts. The next way is review. What did I get right and wrong, and do I actually understand why? This is hard. Actually, real quick before I get into that, on drilling, please, 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 you start off slowly. Do not do these timed and do these on the easiest level of questions. Like I said, this is typically going to be like 1 through 10 in most LR sets. And then for the RC passages, pick things that are low complexity, pick things that you find interesting. If you do that, you'll find that the LSAT isn't something that you dread. It's not something that you're scared of maybe finding out that you're not good at something that you thought that you were great at. If you approach it this way, there's less pressure on yourself. You are trying to figure it out. You're doing what you're supposed to, and you're doing it at the pace you're supposed to, which is gradually. Sorry, and I'll go back to reviewing. This is critical. Like articulating
is critical for reviewing. And I'm gonna dive into this a little bit. When I say you approach these questions honestly, when I would review a question, which we're gonna do on right after this, my review process for one question would take about half a page of my notebook. And it would probably take me maybe when I was first starting out, very first starting out, maybe 20, 30 minutes. Just grinding and you're gonna keep banging away at that door without making any progress. The better way to approach is a goal-driven outcome. I'm gonna spend the rest of this week practicing sufficient assumption LR questions, and then I'm gonna improve my speed on reading science passages because I found that science passages are really confusing and I don't like them. So I'm gonna try to get faster at just reading them. This is a goal. I want to get faster at reading science passages. I want to be confident in my approach to sufficient assumption questions. That is where you can actually track your progress. Last week, I might have gotten 6 out of 10 wrong, but this week I got 9 out of 10 right. This is where you see the changes I'm making actually yielding results. This is intentional studying. This is measurable outcomes. This directly practices the skills that I just described that are required for performing highly on the LSAT. Last step. Can everyone make sure that they're muted real quick? Okay, I just muted. Cool. Strategize. Strategize is a bit more abstract. You can ask questions at the end, but you're identifying a conscious action that you're gonna take the next time you practice. What do I mean by that? I'm going to tell myself, let's say I get this question wrong. I'm not sure. The first time I did this question, I wasn't sure like what's going on. I wasn't confident in what the stimulus was saying. I wasn't really sure what the answer choice I picked was saying, but it felt right. So instead, answer choices in the stimulus, and I'm gonna make sure is the word being used in the stimulus in the same context, in the same application as the word that's being used in the answer choices. That is what strategy looks like. And then when I go drill again, I now have a new approach to apply. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do a question with you guys. I think that this is the most helpful to, like, this is gonna be a template for you guys. We're gonna work through a question. I'm gonna tell you how I approach it, and then I'm gonna tell you how I would review it. And also, yeah, this question comes straight from a practice test. It's question 17. So 17 and 26 is typically a little bit harder, but I feel like this one is very straightforward in its review that I think you guys will be able to apply to a lot of questions. So that's why I chose it. So question 17. To establish a
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Do you know
tremendous quantities of basic materials at the site of the colony?
Excuse me, you keep
Because the cost of transporting
blanking
such
out.
materials through space would be so high, it will not be economically feasible to colonize Mars. Okay, like, again, when I read this for the first time, these are big words. These are words that I'm not familiar with. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an astronaut. I know what space is. I know what Mars is. I know what a human colony is, but I'm not familiar with this material. The way that I make this make sense to me is I break it down. I make things so simple that it instantly clicks in my head. What is the meaning of the stimulus? What should I care about in the stimulus? What is the relevant information in the stimulus? That looks like, and so I'm not looking at any answer choices. I'm not looking at the question stem yet. I'm still on the stimulus. I need to be 100% sure I know what's happening in the stimulus. I know what the author's argument is, and I know what reasons he's using to support it. In this case, but because the cost of transporting such materials through space would be so high, it will not be economically feasible to colonize Mars. To me, that sounds like an opinion. It will not be economically feasible to colonize Mars. That sounds like an argument this guy's trying to make. And then I read a little right before, because the cost of transport such materials through space would be so high, that's why it's not going to be economically feasible to colonize Mars. And again, when I read this, I'm not reading this the way it's presented. Instead, I break this down. So I'm going to go to the next slide for a second, and I'm going to come back to this one. So this is the first step. I'm still breaking things down. First, I'm identifying the author's argument. Let's go back real quick. It will not be economically feasible to colonize Mars. Big words. I'm going to keep it simple. Colonizing Mars, not economically feasible. Every relevant fact is still there. I know what's happening. I know where it's happening. I know what the author thinks about it. What is his support for that? These are described as premises. That was the author's conclusion. This is the decision I've arrived at, and these are the reasons I'm using to support that. First, because the cost of transporting such materials through space would be so high. Transporting such materials. What materials? Look back. Assembling tremendous quantities of basic materials at the site of the colony. Okay, the materials to assemble the colony. Because the materials to assemble the colony are so expensive to transfer, that's why it's economically unfeasible to colonize Mars.
He's gone again.
Yeah, I don't know if he realizes that this keeps happening, but we're all trying to get his attention, so I don't know. I definitely think everyone needs to be understanding. Like, I'm sure he's just starting out and like doesn't know that these things are happening. So like, be understanding that things happen. He probably doesn't know, but he will find out eventually.
He's a great tutor.
Right answers and wrong answers on the LSAT. So immediately, there's things that are like glaring to me. Only that is pretty strong, right? Only if this happens, and then I read that the cost of transporting materials from Earth to Mars. Where did Earth come from? I don't remember the author ever mentioning Earth. This is me trying to fill in the blanks for the author. The author is mentioning Earth. Sorry, the answer choice is mentioning Earth. But I look back to the relevant information I identified. What is the author's argument? What are the reasons he's using to support it? No mention of those materials needing to come from Earth. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll say something like beyond scope, and they'll leave it at that. And this does nothing for you. This is so unspecific and it's impossible to improve on because you don't know what you're doing wrong. Beyond scope is so generic. What does it mean for something to be beyond scope? In the LSAT context, beyond scope, what that generally means, what I've seen from what students use in their wrong answer journals, what they actually mean instead of beyond scope is that this is not relevant to the feasibility, or this is not relevant to the author's conclusion. That is essentially what beyond scope means. We're talking about things that are that the author is unconcerned with. The author is not concerned about where those materials are coming from. The author is not concerned about the overall feasibility of colonizing Mars. Because I'm going back to the answer choice real quick. To Mars decreases, will only if the cost of transporting materials from Earth to Mars decreases, will human habitation be established on Mars. Again, human habitation is different than colonizing Mars. What if I had like a city there? Why does it have to be a colony? This author is only making a statement relevant to economic feasibility. Materials required for human habitation there. When I think about the author's question, after I do step 1, what is the author's argument? Step 2, what is he using to improve? What is he using to prove that? What is he using to
Everyone
say
raise
that
your
this will happen?
hand so he pays
Or what is he
attention to
saying
the
say that
chat.
this is likely to happen? And then what's a reason why he might not be wrong? Again, I'm doing all 3 of these things before I even get to the answer choices. When I read that for the first time, and again, guys, I'm not looking at the stimulus. I'm just keeping what I've realized is the relevant information. Colonizing Mars not economically feasible because of the materials costs. Once you do enough questions, your brain will start to work in a certain way, where you'll realize that the reasons of justification that are being used by a lot of authors, they are trying to tell you that those are the only reasons that matter. That is a pattern that you'll see happening again and again in the LSAT. The author is trying to convince you the reasons I've provided are the only reasons that matter. But if you ask yourself, what is the question asking me? Which of the following is an assumption required by the argument? Which one of these assumptions is necessary for this argument to be valid, for it to be true? The argument being colonizing Mars is unfeasible.
Okay. Is anyone taking notes?
This question he's going over is a typical practice question. So just follow what he's saying about the strategy and how to break down the
Then the
question.
reason the author just gave me for why colonizing Mars is not possible is no longer relevant because you don't have to transport anything anymore. Again, what I'm going through right now might feel a bit complicated, might feel a bit foreign, might feel like I can't see myself ever doing that. Remember, I have done a lot of these questions. I prepared this question specifically for you guys. This is the product of a lot, months and months of work. Once you guys get into this, because I remember a lot of you guys said that you're just starting, this will not feel as intimidating, as daunting, as impossible to do as you might feel right now. This is the approach that everyone uses who's scoring at the top. I got a 175. I have a lot of people in this space that I've spoken with who are also high scorers, other tutors. This approach distilled, basically what I kind of tried to really quick run through in this is how everyone teaches improving long-term understanding on the LSAT. Diligence, practice, and humility. Understanding what is going on, admitting to yourself when you don't know what's going on, and then spending the time to figure out for the next time you do that question. So again, in this one, if I needed to strategize for the future, I'm gonna articulate specifically what the mistake I had made was. So in this case, I might have incorrectly assumed that the author implied colonizing Mars was entirely unfeasible. And then I selected answer choice A because I thought that the author is actually talking about all kinds of feasibility. And he said that transportation of materials is really expensive. So what if the cost of those materials went down? Again, answer choice A, what it's counting on is that we are not reading specific, we're not reading to the letter, and we are considering information that is not relevant. That is what the LSAT is constantly trying to trap you on. Just in the interest of time to keep moving. Again, if you have any questions about this process specifically, you can shoot me questions after, but what I'm going through right now is the way that everyone who scores at the highest level approaches reviewing their questions. Next, I'm going to go through quickly a sample schedule that you guys can use. This is one that I made for again, this is a bit, distilled. It's not as comprehensive as I provided, but this is a short breakdown of a schedule that a full-time client of mine who's working like a 9-to-5 job that she used to prepare for the LSAT. The first week, she's taking her diagnostic, she's taking it on time, she's sitting with her results, she's identifying, okay, I had 2 LR sections, I had 2 RC sections. First LR section, I missed 8. The second one, I missed 10. The third one, I missed 6. And the last one, I missed 12. And then of those, I missed 7 weekend questions, 5 principal, 6 parallel reasoning, et cetera, et cetera. The author what is the author most likely to support? That took me the longest, and I got 3 out of those 4 questions wrong. Science passages were really confusing. You're identifying, you're making notes. Like, this is what I felt. This is what I noticed. Weeks 2 and 3, you're working through foundational material. She was the kind of person who wanted to have a bit more background knowledge, so I gave her things that I thought were best suited for her aptitude and need. And so she would go through some of these resources. She would ask me questions if she didn't feel comfortable with it. But basically, her goal was to learn basic argument structure. What are some common logical indicators? Like I said, only is one. And then start to read. The reading comprehension section is really just not fun for most people. It's not that interesting. It's written in a way that's supposed to be complicated and confusing. It's not exciting for a lot of people. So we have to get used to that. We have to read things that we're not particularly passionate about, but we care enough about what this means for us that we're willing to do it. We care enough about getting a high LSAT score that we are willing to suffer through a science passage that we might hate. And then weeks 4 and 5 and 6 and so on and so forth is a lot of drilling, a lot of reviewing, and then we get into practice tests. But that start, I feel like anyone can use. Next, I think this is going to be very helpful for everyone here. Like I said, the LSAT space really undertrains the mental aspect of the LSAT. This is obviously like a skills-based test. Can you reason through an argument? Can you understand a passage that's presented to you? But it's hard. It's a exercise for your brain that most people have never ever done anything similar to, except in high school, maybe a standardized test here or there. Even our exams in college for most of us, they're not like the way the LSAT is. They're not these 2.5 hour slogs of constantly having to digest new information, unfamiliar information. So the way I train that is meditation. I have a pretty unique approach that directly trains the way that you're going to be tested on the LSAT. But any kind of meditation helps. You're training sustaining your focus. Start small. Start something that you feel comfortable with. 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, 3 minutes there, and then start building up your time, trying to get to 35 minutes. Other place, like I said, the LSAT is not really fun for us, but we can kind of make it fun. So for a lot of my clients, I try to find things that I think that they care about, that they're passionate about, that they find interesting. Some people are pretty academically inclined. They're looking for articles and some blogs and some writers that they're really passionate about. Other people prefer, reading on their phone. So I'll find some people on Twitter that like post essays on Twitter. Some people hate both of those. And so I found that fan fiction, if you guys are unfamiliar with, is really helpful for some people who don't find any of that other stuff interesting. But yeah, I think both of these things you guys can immediately start implementing. Any kind of meditation helps, but I think there is a specific trained way that you can apply to improve your sustained focus the way that it's going to be applied on the LSAT. And then reading for fun, anyone can do this. Just find something that you like and then try to read through it as often as you can. So yeah, that's the seminar, guys. I'm going to come back and check the chat real quick, but my goal was mainly to go over a lot of substance-based information. Gosh, I don't know if anyone's saying anything. The website, there we go. Okay, I see a few raised hands. I'm not going to go through the chat real quick because there's a bunch of questions I want you guys to get through faster. Yeah, I can't see the chat. So yeah, if I see some hands raised, feel free to do that instead. I'll go through the other stuff later. Neil, feel free to unmute, Neil. The right answer choice was E.
Oh, my bad. We were just trying to get your attention by raising our hands. There was a problem with you cutting out a lot.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, not to jump in, but
the chat. I'm sorry about that, guys.
nope, not to jump in. I was just going to say that's what the majority of the chat is as well. It was just us trying to notify you. We missed a lot of pretty much the whole sample section you're explaining, unfortunately. So yeah, that's all that is.
Oh, I really had no idea. You should get the recording. That's really frustrating. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, we're just wondering if the recording will pick up on it or not, if it'll cut out too. But hopefully maybe if you can record it separately and also have Leland send that out, that'll be really helpful.
Yeah, I had no idea. I'm sorry. If you guys want me to, if you guys are anyone who wants to hang out real quick, I can go over the sample question real quick and you can feel free to answer any questions. Ask any questions. I'll be looking at the chat. You guys want me to do that?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Rabia?
Yeah, so I had a question. If you can quickly answer
I'm gonna go back to that slide real quick.
Stuff related to how long do you think that we should start prepping, or really general questions, but before we take the LSAT, is it 3 months, 6 months, etc.?
I would be hesitant to just give you a time. I think it's very dependent on the person, right? You might need a little bit longer on certain question types than other people, but other question types might feel really intuitive to you and you fly through those faster. I would not put I am going to do this, or I need to do this in 3 months, or unless you have obviously some kind of obligation. I want to, apply by this time, and the LSAT at this date is the last time I can take it. If you are I'm setting aside this time to prepare for the LSAT, I would say get into it, and then you'll start to realize okay, this is how long it takes me to improve. This is how long it takes me to progress. And then you'll figure out by around this date, I'll feel comfortable enough to take the test. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that question real quick, guys. Oh, also real quick on, I think that last point on that. Typically what I've seen from most people is like the average is about 5-6 months. People who are like full-time studying, I've seen like some people who really dramatically improve in like 3 months. But like I said, full-time studying, this is like they treat it as a job. But yeah, I would just set aside as much time as you possibly can um to work through it. Exactly. It depends on the individual. It depends on your background information, but around 5 to 6 months for most people. If you're full-time studying, I think some people might get it done in 3.
And kind of following up on that, like how long would you recommend studying daily when you just start out? Like would you just recommend 30 minutes, an hour?
So again, like I don't think that it's a time thing. Like your brain is not sitting there going like, okay, I have 30 minutes of effort in me. Your brain understands that I am going to achieve this goal. Like this is how our brains are hardwired. If you tell yourself this week, I'm setting aside the goal of mastering sufficient assumption questions, you will see infinitely more progress than if you just blindly try to do 30 minutes a day. Because some days you might have the gas tank for 2 hours, an hour. Some days you might be burnt and you just want to do something so that you feel like you got something done. I would rather you do 15 here and then do it again the next day, do it again the next day, than trying to set a specific amount of time per each day. If it's helpful for you, you can, but I would not use that as like the basis for my studying approach. I'm gonna do this question real quick before I answer any more questions. And I'm gonna keep this very succinct. My 3-step process for every LR question. First, what is the author's argument? It feels simple for most people. Again, most people don't realize that they don't understand what they're reading. They feel like this might be the author's argument, but they can't prove it to themselves. My first step is proving to myself I know what the author's argument is. What is the author trying to prove? It will not be economically feasible to colonize Mars. That is an opinion. What is the author using to support that? First, because the cost of transporting such materials, I'm going to stop. What materials? Go back. To establish a human colony on Mars would involve assembling tremendous quantities of basic material at the site of the colony. Basic materials, cool. So because the cost of transporting basic materials through space would be so high, that's why it's economically unfeasible to colonize Mars. Real quick, what I just did there is I told myself, well, I've identified this is the author's conclusion, and I've identified this is what he's using to support that. I'm not considering any information besides that. I'm only thinking about what is the author's information, what is the author's conclusion, what is he using to support that? Everything else in the stimulus, I'm not considering. I'm not wasting my brain power on that. Now that I've done that, again, before I get to any answer choices, I'm going to ask myself. And this, again, for a lot of you guys will not feel normal or intuitive at all. It did not for me, but you're trying to think of reasons. You're trying to be skeptical for why the author might be wrong. What if I didn't have to transport those materials? What if I could just find those materials? What if those materials are already on Mars? Is there anything in this stimulus that's disqualifying that? No. There's nothing that's telling me that these materials are only available here or it's only available there. The author's trying to get me to fill in the gaps. They're trying to get me to say that, oh, this must be the only place that materials are available, so you have to transport them. That's not happening. And I know that because I, again, identify what is the author's conclusion. All I'm thinking about is what did he say to support that. Now I'm going to look at some answer choices. But actually, before I answer choices, I'm going to look at the question stem. Which of the following is an assumption required by the argument? Again, I have a lot of familiarity with this test. I know what question type this is. This is called a necessary assumption question. What essentially that means is, I wrote this explanation, sorry, because I thought it was the cleanest, so I want to make sure I get that to you guys. Yes. Ask yourself, literally ask yourself in your head, does this answer choice seem like something the author would have to agree with if their conclusion is true? go through each answer choice, asking myself that question. Does the author have to agree with this answer choice? That, as a necessary assumption question, that is my approach to it. I'm looking at every answer choice. I'm reminding myself in my head, this is the author's conclusion. This is what he's using to support that. And then I look at each answer choice. I'm asking myself, does the author have to agree with this in order for that conclusion that I just reminded myself for that to be valid? Answer choice A, only if the cost of transporting materials from Earth to Mars decreases will human habitation be established on Mars. The author's argument, because I just told myself, is only related to the economic feasibility of colonizing Mars. It's not addressing overall feasibility of human habitation. It's only concerned about economic feasibility, because colonizing is not the only form of human habitation. The author can still maintain their position even if answer choice A is true. Let's say that the cost for transporting these materials came down, but they came down by 1%. Does that mean that the author now has to agree with that it's now feasible for human habitation to be established on Mars? No. And that's a very real possibility. Going down could be 1%, could be 50%, could be 99%. It's too broad, and I'm not going to fill in the gaps for the author. That is how I'll identify a wrong answer. I'm going to check chat real quick just to make sure you guys got that. Is that all coming through?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. And then I'm going to do the right answer choice real quick. The right answer choice, again, I'm articulating my reasoning. I'm being as specific as I possibly can be because that's the only way that I can prove to myself I know what's happening. Answer choice E. Did it go? You guys can see that? Okay, cool. Answer choice E. I'm going to remind myself before they read this. What is the author's argument? Colonizing Mars is not economically unfeasible. Or colonizing Mars is economically unfeasible. What is he using to support that? You need to transport materials, basic materials, and the transportation of basic materials is expensive. E. Mars is not a practical source of the basic materials required for establishing human habitation there. This is like when I first went through this question, I immediately chose answer choice E because when I was going through the stimulus, remember, before I looked at any answer choices, before I looked at any of the question stem, I first asked myself, what is a scenario in which the author's conclusion is not valid? And the one that I came up with and I felt good about was, what if I could get those materials elsewhere? What if I could get those materials at Mars? Then I wouldn't have to transport anything. E. Mars is not a practical source of the basic materials. If answer choice E is true, then the author's argument falls apart. There's no transportation required anymore. There's no transportation of, and I'm going to go back to the stimulus real quick, because the cost of transporting such materials through space. If these materials are on Mars, there's no transportation through space. Sure, I might have to build a train track from this volcano to that mountain, but it's not transportation through space. That is why answer choice E is required. It's necessary for the author to agree with that if he wants his conclusion to be true. And when I write that out, like, again, this is a very succinct version of that. This is like a few sentences for me usually. This is the only answer choice that is directly addressing the author's claim. If this is untrue, Mars is a source, then the cause the author gave me for economic unfeasibility is no longer relevant. I no longer have to care about that. I no longer have to care about the support they just provided. So that's basically how I go through a question. Yeah, that's pretty, again, like I said, I tried to get through as specific as possible. I'm so sorry about the connection. I had no idea. But yeah, if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Towards the end of this presentation, I hope that you guys got that material. If anyone in chat wants to ask to go over anything else real quick, if you missed it, feel free to ask. But yeah, I'll open the floor to some questions. But before I do that, real quick, I just want to go to the last slide again. I remember that a lot of you guys said that you were just starting out. I think that there we go. This is probably even more helpful. I hope so. Trevin, the reason I made this is I have had so many people ask this question. I don't know how to study. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if what I'm doing works. I don't know. I can't see any progress. This is how you improve. This is it. This is behind a lot of paywalls. There's a lot of different courses. It's going to be in different language. It's this. Eunice, you only provide one-on-one tutoring. You have paid group sessions. I'm not sure. Right now, I do not have any paid group sessions, but I'm thinking that it might be helpful for some people. One-on-one tutoring, that's what I'm doing right now. If you want to message me, you can use this code to get started. We can do a consultation call to see if you're like, this works for me. This is what I'm looking for. We can make a deal that might work better for your budget. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any specific questions. You mentioned you're going over some more resources to use at the end. Right before that, how many times do you take the LSAT? I took it once. I took it last June. I told myself that I really did not want to take it again. So I would only take it when I was 100% confident in my scores. I was practice testing, I was PTing where I wanted to. Before I took it in June, I gotten 175 or 180, 175 through 180 5 times on practice tests. So I was confident that I knew what I was doing. And then, I took it in June, got the 175, felt good about that. You mentioned going over some resources at the end. Resources, I think that a lot of this stuff is like I don't want to spend a lot of time on things that I think are pretty available online. You can Google like everything I just said. There's no going wrong with like the first like 5 to 7 big resources. I would recommend though trial versions. Like just try them out to see if like the approach or the style or the method works for you. Do that first. And I think all these platforms have some kind of free version. Do that first, try it for a while, and then you're like, okay, this is what I like doing. I don't have any dread checking out this website. It's being presented information that makes sense to me. That is what you should do first before I think buying one of these pretty expensive subscriptions. Lauren, how old are you? I am 22. TC, what is your fee schedule for your services? TC, feel free to message me on Leland. Yeah, you can inbox me anytime. Hopefully, I hear back from some of you guys. I think that a lot of the LSAT study prep does not have to be as miserable or hard as it's presented online. There is a very real way to do this that doesn't have to suck. You can feel proud of yourself. You can feel good about the skills that you've improved on. You will see changes in your own life. I feel more confident in the information I read and if I understand it or not. And so that's the kind of approach I bring to the LSAT. I think if you are trying to improve on something that you hate, that you dread, that you feel like there's no value in, it's going to be very hard to get to to get through the low points, you know. Fidan is just to understand which questions you. The untimed diagnostic is basically to just get started. What it tells you is, okay, I've got a good background on science passages. I feel really comfortable working through those, but I really struggle with social sciences. I don't have a lot of familiarity with this material. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I'm looking for a way to improve on that. I do really well on strengthening questions, but I totally missed the mark on weakening ones. I missed 5 of the 6 ones, 5 of the 6 that were presented to me. That is kind of the information you're using. Anything that you're kind of analyzing it. You're looking for, what are some patterns I'm noticing? What are some points where I noticed like I didn't feel great? I doubted myself, or these are points where I felt like I flew through them. They felt so intuitive. Simran, what study goals should we set when starting out? Study. Oh, Alexa is going off. Study goals. It's pretty, it's up to you, like I tell every one of my clients that I would like you to tell me a goal score range. If I get a score between this to this, I'll feel happy and proud of myself because that gives you something to work towards, If you're kind of just like, I want to get better at the LSAT, it's again, pretty broad. I think the more specific, the more goal driven we can get, the easier it is to figure out how to get there. Who offers a diagnostic test? You can find it on I think Khan Academy used to, but they merged with Law Hub. Law Hub has a diagnostic, 7Sage has a diagnostic, LSAT Labs probably has a diagnostic, LSAT Demon I think has a diagnostic. Lauren, can I make a comment? Yeah, feel free to put in the chat. Will we be going to law school? I'm getting some information, not information. I'm getting some decisions back right now. I'm not committed to a school yet. Hopefully they give me a lot more money, but yeah, I just think that, yeah, I'll find out soon, but right now I'm pretty, I don't know. I found a lot more fulfillment from teaching this test than I really expected. I think that I have worked with so many people who felt like they can't, this is not for them. And it's because of so many people online who feel a need to boost their own ego, that they feel a need to put other people down. I like to make sure that people understand like this is a test. If one of your friends did bad on a biology test, you wouldn't think that they're a dumb guy now. If one of your friends was struggling in calculus, you wouldn't think that she's stupid. You would just realize calculus is hard and it takes a lot of effort to get better at it. The LSAT is just like that. It's a test, but it's not your intelligence. It's not an IQ test. It's none of that. It's just a test that we need to take so that we can get into law school. I see 3 people who raised their hands. Do you guys want to unmute and say something?
Yeah, so thank you so much for doing this. It was really good. I really liked the strategy section that you're talking about and breaking down the questions. So my question is that do you think that it is like, do you think that there's an equal improvement in the RC and the logic portions, or is there sometimes where you're like better in one and then slower in the other? How did it go for you?
So yeah, I do think it's in my experience, I think a lot of people feel more comfortable with certain sections. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I've been reading my whole life. I did well in the SAT reading section. Like reading comprehension feels very intuitive to me. And then they get to logical reasoning and they're like, is this Swahili? Like, I have no idea what's going on here. I've never had to think like this before. Other people, naturally very skeptical people, naturally people who are used to approaching life in a way that carries over well into the LSAT and carries especially well over into the LR. Lord, is it related to the LSAT? Because I just want everyone to get questions in about the LSAT right now. So Simran, if your question's about the LSAT, feel free, or Daniela, feel free.
Hi, thank you so much again for this this session. I really found it useful. I don't know if you could talk about your experience specifically with RC. For me, I think I'm still going over like the foundationals for RC, but to preface, I took my first LSAT in November 2023. Really just like, I don't know, like lost in the woods, you know, did the power score Bibles, did a lot of memorization. And of course you could imagine that went really mediocre. So I'm really taking the time to like go through, you know, the foundations, and I have seen, you know, tremendous progress in my you know, PT scores. But for reading comp, I feel like I'm still like stuck in a little bit of a rut. So if you have any advice or tips for RC specifically, I feel like I am learning how to read again for the first time. So yeah.
I mean, like, I totally understand that. Like, these are not interesting, like, cool passages for a lot of people. The LSAC actually rewrites most of them to be a little bit more confusing and to be a little bit more dense, but to be a bit more opinionated so that we can, you know, identify an argument. Reading comprehension, really, it kind of breaks down to, if there's one word I'd use, I'd say like structure, like what is happening and how is it happening? What is the author saying and what is he using to prove that? Like we think of NLR happens, but it's a bit longer, it's a bit bigger, it's a bit more abstract. You're transitioning from idea to idea to idea. It doesn't feel as obvious as a stimulus might. But the way that you have to approach it is a structured way where you're like, I understand what's happening in this first part. And then I understand how the author goes to this next thing. Then I understand how the author goes to this next thing. And then I also understand what these three things have in common. What's the main idea that they're all pushing? That approach of what is happening here, reminding yourself actively, I just read this first paragraph. Okay, and this is how I approach reading comprehension. I'm actively talking in my head the whole time I'm doing it. Just read this paragraph. Okay, the author's telling me that these kinds of ants are especially dangerous because they're poisons, but they were eradicated because of blah, blah, blah. And then I'm telling myself these things, okay? And then as I get through each paragraph, I'm saying this connects to that because of this. I wish I could be a little bit more specific than this connects to that because of this, but you can apply that to every RC passage you'll have in the future. How does this idea presented in this paragraph connect to that idea presented in the next paragraph, connect to that idea presented in the last paragraph, and how did all three of the ideas come forward to push one idea? Yeah, I think that's a little bit, I think I try to keep it abstract, I try to keep it general so that you can apply it to all of your RC passages, but I hope that's helpful.
No, that is. Thank you so much.
Of course. And yeah, like you said, you took the LSAT November 23 memorization. The good thing is, you know, you learned, right? You realize like that didn't work for me. That didn't give me the score I wanted, so I'm gonna try something differently. So you should be A, proud of yourself that you made the switch, and B, like confident that you tried something, you realized it didn't work, and what you're doing now is yielding you the results that you wanted.
Oh, thanks. I think also same to you. Like I definitely am not, registering for the test till I see, my, goal range of what I want. So yeah, it's been a journey. Definitely improvements have been made. And just gonna keep pushing.
Awesome. I think that you got the right idea. Keep pushing, right? Tip for everyone here. I would not take this test if you do not feel confident going in. If you do not feel like I've been testing where I want to, if you do not feel like I'm confident what I'm going to apply on test day, if you don't feel like I understand how I'm going to approach this test, and then you walk into test day and you get a question that you don't feel confident on, most people just crumble. And it's extremely hard to recover once that first section you feel like didn't go well. The second section feels like it's just going to be worse and then worse. And then this compounds. And I've seen this happen a lot. I've never told a client, like, you do not go in until you feel confident, until you're testing where you want to. You have tangible evidence that you can point to as, this is proof I know what I'm doing. And this is proof that when I go into test day, I'm going to take those same skills with me. So yeah, I would not say to anyone, like, don't test until you're 100% confident, like, got this, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I hope that answered pretty much everything. Lauren, do you have something?
Yeah, I've been I've been trying to get on the mic for a minute. So I'm a 31-year-old social scientist from Seattle, and I have a lot of information in regards to studying, especially for individuals who identify with the neurodivergent, brain brain chemistry, if you will. So a lot of people I noticed were asking about like when's the best time to test, how much should I test in a week, how long is this going to take? So the first thing is a lot of people are going to be more prepared if they studied logic, reasoning, English, and social sciences in regards to in regards to the LSAT. So the LSAT is a very like critical thinking test. That's what it's testing you on. So if you have skills that you've studied that are more along the lines of what the LSAT is about, then you will likely be more prepared for it than maybe somebody who didn't go to school for something like social sciences, political sciences, things like that. So the other
Gotcha.
thing is
Awesome.
the
Laura, I'm just
brain.
gonna cut you off real quick. I think that I just want to make sure that I think I've gone like 25 minutes over time. I don't want to hold anyone here for too long. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for coming. Again, feel free to reach out to me. You can message me on Leland.
All right.
You can. Thank you. Did you mute? Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I seriously appreciate this. I really hope this was helpful. I really apologize for all of the connection issues. I had no idea that was happening. But yeah, if there's anything that, Lauren, I have to make sure that we end this on time. Thank you guys again for coming. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to repeat myself, but I'll let you guys go. Thank you again. If you have any questions about recordings or anything